On the distant planet of Zephyros, an ancient and peaceful world, there was a queen whose heart was heavy with sorrow. Queen Silrith ruled with wisdom and strength, a respected leader among her people. She had ruled for many years, guiding her kingdom with grace. But despite all her power, there was one thing she could not control: the suffering of her daughter, Princess Arelyn. The princess had once been the heart and soul of the kingdom, a bright, joyful girl who could light up even the darkest corners. Of the palace with her laughter, Arelyn was beloved by her people. But that was before the sickness struck. It had begun slowly, like a shadow creeping across the land, at first unnoticed. The princess began to withdraw into herself, no longer speaking with the warmth she once had. Her eyes, once full of curiosity and wonder, grew empty and cold. She lost all interest in the world around her. It was as if something inside her had been snuffed out, something that no healer or doctor could find. As the years passed, the condition only worsened. Arelyn no longer laughed, no longer cried, no longer spoke with emotion. She had become a shell of the person she once was, and it was breaking the heart of her mother, Queen Silrith. The queen had consulted every doctor, healer, and sage in the kingdom, yet nothing worked. Every method, every cure, every attempt had failed, and so, in desperation, the queen turned to an ancient prophecy passed down through the generations of Zephyros's royal family. It spoke of a human, a stranger from another world, who would awaken the princess's lost emotions, who would light the flame of life back inside her. For years, Silrith had dismissed the idea, seeing it as nothing, more than an old tale meant to bring hope to the hopeless. Humans, after all, were a distant species, scattered across the stars, and their ways were very different from those of the Zephyrians. But as her daughter's condition grew worse, Silrith could no longer afford the luxury of disbelief. Sudden prophecy was the only chance she had left. The queen had one final hope: a human warrior known for his strength and courage. Silrith had heard whispers of his deeds across the galaxy. They spoke of a man named Marcus Walker, a human soldier who had fought in countless battles and survived against impossible odds. She had seen the stories of his bravery and skill, but it was his heart, his willingness to fight for others, that caught her attention. It was said that his touch could heal the wounds of the soul, a quality that could be the key to breaking the emotional barrier surrounding Arelyn. Queen Silrith knew that the journey to find Marcus Walker would not be easy. She would have to travel to distant planets, cross paths with dangerous beings, and fight against forces she had never encountered. But it was a journey she was willing to make. The life of her daughter was at stake. As the queen made her preparations, she stood before Arelyn's bed. The princess lay still, her face pale and unreadable. Her once beautiful golden hair lay in messy tangles across the pillow, and her clothes, once elegant and flowing, were now forgotten and neglected. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was shallow. She seemed so far away, as if the very essence of who she was had been taken by some unseen force. Silrith's heart clenched as she gazed down at her daughter. She remembered the child who had once run through the halls of the palace, her laughter echoing through the walls. She had been the joy of their people, the hope for the future. But now, she was just a shadow of that girl, a girl who had lost her way. The queen gently brushed a lock of hair away from Arelyn's face, her fingers trembling. She had tried everything. Every healer, every magic, every science. But nothing had worked. Her last hope rested in the hands of a human, a stranger who would walk into their world and, with a single touch, bring her daughter back to life. "You must wake, my sweet Arelyn," Silrith whispered softly, tears welling in her eyes. "You must live again, for yourself and for Zephyros. I will do whatever it takes to save you." With those words, the queen turned and left the room, her resolve firm but heavy with the weight of the unknown. she would find this human warrior. She would bring him to her daughter, and she would make sure he could succeed where everyone else had failed. The journey to find Marcus Walker would not be easy. It would take her across the stars, into the depths of the universe, to places where few had ever dared to go. But the Queen knew one thing with certainty. She would stop at nothing to save her daughter, to light the flame that had been extinguished. As Silrith made her preparations, little did she know that Marcus Walker, the man she sought, was facing his own trials. Across the galaxy, the soldier was embroiled in a battle far from Zephyros, unaware that his destiny was about to change forever. But soon, the paths of the Queen and the soldier would cross, and the fate of a princess and an entire kingdom would rest on their meeting. But for now, the Queen's only thought was one: I must save Arelyn. I will do whatever it takes. Marcus Walker had always been a man of action. His life as a soldier had taken him across countless planets, through wars and battles, and into the heart of some of the galaxy's most dangerous conflicts. Yet, despite all the violence and bloodshed he had witnessed, there was something about this next mission that felt different. He didn't know why, but the call to Zephyros had stirred something inside him, a feeling that he couldn't shake. He sat in his small, quiet quarters aboard the spaceship Courageous, staring at the holographic message that had brought him here. The message had come from the Galactic Council, a group of leaders from many different worlds. The message itself was simple, but the request it contained was anything but. Marcus Walker, the voice of the council leader, had said, "You are requested to travel to the planet Zephyros. There, you will meet Queen Silrith of the Zephyrian people. She has a task for you, a task that may sound unbelievable, but it is one that only you can fulfill." Marcus had been skeptical at first. What could the queen of an alien world want with a human soldier? His role as a soldier was clear: fight, protect, and survive. He had never imagined that one day he would be asked to do something so personal. The council leader had explained that the Queen's daughter, Princess Arelyn, was gravely ill. She had lost all ability to feel emotion, and her condition was slowly killing her. The prophecy that had been passed down for generations stated that only a human could help her. Only the touch of a human could bring her emotions back to life. At first, Marcus had dismissed the idea as a myth. He was used to dealing with physical battles, not emotional ones. But when the council spoke of the prophecy and the power that the Queen believed a human could possess, he felt a strange pull, something that made him consider the request more seriously. He had seen enough to know that sometimes the universe didn't make sense. Sometimes, strange things happened, and you had to act, even when you didn't fully understand why. And so here he was, preparing to meet the Queen and the princess on a planet that was as distant from his own home as he could imagine. The journey to Zephyros had been long, but Marcus had spent the time reflecting on what awaited him. He wasn't a healer, nor a psychic, nor a magician. He was just a soldier. How could he possibly help someone who had lost the ability to feel? Marcus shook his head, pushing away his doubts. He had come this far. Now, he had to see it through. Whatever this human touch was that the Queen believed would save the princess, he would have to find it. And if he could, then maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to change Arelyn's fate. As the Courageous descended into the atmosphere of Zephyros, Marcus could see the planet's beauty from above. It was a world of lush green forests, sprawling oceans, and towering mountain ranges that seemed to touch the sky. From space, it looked like a peaceful, perfect world, a world untouched by war. But Marcus knew that peace could be fragile, and the royal palace, where he would soon land, would hold secrets of its own. The landing was smooth, and the palace stood out against the natural beauty of the land. It was a magnificent structure, built into the mountainside with spires that stretched towards the heavens. As Marcus stepped, Off the ship, he was greeted by a group of Zephyrian guards, their uniforms adorned with silver and blue accents. They looked different from humans. Their tall, slender bodies, long limbs, and skin that shimmered in the sunlight, giving them an ethereal presence. Yet despite their alien appearance, Marcus could see the seriousness in their eyes. They were here to protect their queen and their people, and they would do whatever it took to ensure that nothing happened to her daughter. One of the guards led Marcus through the grand halls of the palace. The walls were lined with intricate carvings, and the air smelled of sweet flowers and fresh greenery from the outside world. As they walked, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Everything here was different from Earth, from the people to the architecture to the very atmosphere itself. It was like stepping into another world entirely. Finally, they reached the Queen's chambers, a vast, beautiful room filled with ancient tapestries and delicate furniture. Queen Silrith sat at a large table, her dark hair flowing down her back, like a waterfall. She was a regal figure, her presence commanding yet kind. Her eyes, filled with both wisdom and sorrow, turned to Marcus as he entered. "Welcome, human warrior," she said, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "I am Queen Silrith. I am grateful that you have come." Marcus bowed his head respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said, "I came as requested, but I have to admit, I don't fully understand why I'm here. I'm a soldier. I fight battles. I'm not a healer." The Queen's eyes softened. "I know. And that is why I chose you." She gestured for him to sit, and as he did, she began to explain. "My daughter, Arelyn, was once full of life," the Queen said. "She laughed, she loved, she cared. But something happened, something that took all of her emotions away. She no longer feels anything, no joy, no sorrow, nothing. And without those feelings, she is dying. Our healers cannot help her. The prophecy speaks of a human, someone with the power to awaken her emotions. I believe you are that person, Marcus Walker." Marcus listened intently, his mind racing. He had never heard of a prophecy like this, and he didn't know if he was ready for the task, but he could see the pain in the Queen's eyes. This was not just about saving a life, it was about saving a kingdom's future. "I'll do whatever it takes," Marcus said, finally making his decision. "If there's a chance to help your daughter, I'll try. But I need to meet her." The Queen nodded, and they both stood. "Come, I will take you to her." The halls of the Zephyrian palace were silent as Marcus followed Queen Silrith down the long corridor. The light from the sun outside filtered in through the tall, narrow windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Everything in the palace was grand and yet strangely peaceful, as if the walls themselves held centuries of wisdom and sorrow. As they approached a large set of double doors, the Queen turned to Marcus. "She is in there," Silrith said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. "Arelyn, my daughter." Marcus nodded, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. He had heard so much about Princess Arelyn, her beauty, her kindness, the promise she had once held. But hearing about someone and meeting them in person were two very different things. He didn't know what to expect, and yet he knew this moment would change everything. Queen Silrith pushed open the doors, and Marcus stepped into the room. The sight before him was unexpected. Princess Arelyn lay on a grand bed, her form almost hidden beneath soft, flowing sheets. Her long silver hair spilled over the pillow, and her pale skin seemed to glow softly in the dim light. But it wasn't her beauty that struck Marcus. It was her stillness. There was no energy, no movement. She lay there as if she were just a shadow, her eyes closed and her face expressionless. Silrith stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she touched Arelyn's forehead. "My precious daughter," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Please, please come. Back to me. For a long moment, the queen stood there, lost in her sorrow. Marcus didn't know what to do or say. He had never been in a room with someone who was so still. Her lifeless eyes, the absence of emotion, made him feel as though he were in the presence of a ghost. How could he help? How could he bring life back to someone who seemed so far gone? The queen looked over her shoulder at Marcus, her eyes filled with pleading hope. She has not spoken in years, Marcus. Not a word, not a gesture. There is nothing left of her former self. We've tried everything, medicine, magic, even the best minds in our kingdom have failed. Marcus felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had dealt with injuries and death on the battlefield, but this was different. This wasn't a fight he could win with strength or tactics. This was a battle for something much deeper, a battle for a life, for a soul. He stepped closer to the bed, his boots making soft sounds on the stone floor. He hesitated for a moment, unsure what to do. Finally, he sat down beside her, his gaze fixed on her peaceful face. The silence in the room felt oppressive, but he knew he had to try. Taking a deep breath, Marcus spoke quietly, almost to himself. I've never met anyone like you, Princess. I don't know how this works, how I can help you. But I'm here. I'll try. I promise. There was no response, no flicker in her eyes, no movement. For a moment, Marcus thought she might never react. But then something happened. A slight change in the air, a barely noticeable shift in her posture. It was subtle, but Marcus caught it. Her fingers, once still, twitched slightly. Then her eyes fluttered open. The first thing he noticed was how bright and piercing her eyes were, even in her weakened state. They were a deep shade of violet, shimmering with an almost otherworldly glow. For a moment, they seemed to stare, right through him, as if she were searching for something, or someone deep inside. Then, slowly, her gaze focused on him. "Who are you?" she asked in a soft voice, barely a whisper. Her voice was weak, but it carried a note of curiosity, as though she hadn't spoken in ages and was unsure of how to use her own voice. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. She had spoken. The princess had spoken. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a small spark of life. He didn't know how long it would last, but he couldn't hide the surge of hope that rose within him. "My name is Marcus Walker," he replied, his voice steady but gentle. "I've come to help you. The queen sent for me." Erilyn's eyes moved slowly, scanning his face. "Help?" she repeated, her tone confused. "How can you help me?" Marcus looked down at his hands, unsure of how to explain the impossible. "I don't know how yet," he said, "but I'll do whatever I can. The queen, she believes I can help you. She believes a human's touch will bring you back." A flicker of emotion, something Marcus couldn't quite place, crossed her face. It was as if she didn't believe him, or maybe she was simply too tired to understand. But for a brief moment, he thought he saw a hint of something behind her blank expression, something hidden beneath the surface. "I don't remember feeling anything," Erilyn whispered, her voice soft and distant. "It's all gone. I don't know how to feel anymore." The words hung in the air like a cold wind. Marcus could see the pain behind her eyes, the confusion that must have haunted her for years. She had been trapped in her own mind, cut off from the world around her. But now, he had to find a way to bring her back, to help her feel again. "I can't pretend to know what you're going through," Marcus said softly. "But I promise you, I'll try to help you find your way back. You don't have to stay like this." For a long moment, Erilyn didn't respond, but Marcus didn't move. He stayed there beside her, offering his quiet presence, letting her know that he wasn't going to give up on her. He knew that it would take more than just words to help her. It would take time, patience, and trust. But it was a start. Finally, Erilyn's eyes flickered toward his hand, which rested on the edge of her bed. There was a small spark of curiosity in her gaze, and she slowly lifted her hand. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. The moment their skin made contact, something shifted. A quiet warmth spread through Marcus's chest, and for a brief second, he thought he could feel something from her. A pulse, a small surge of life. Erilyn didn't say anything more, but her hand lingered in his. She didn't pull away, and Marcus didn't let go. It wasn't much, but in that moment, he knew that something inside her had shifted. The flame, though faint, had been lit. Days passed in a quiet rhythm at the Zephyrian Palace. Marcus stayed by Princess Erilyn's side, trying everything he could think of to help her awaken from the deep, silent place where she had been trapped for so long. Every day, he would sit with her, speaking softly, sharing stories of his own life, hoping that his words would somehow break through the walls around her heart. But despite his best efforts, the progress was slow. Erilyn seemed to respond to him at times, sometimes with a look, sometimes with a small movement, but it was never enough. She remained distant, lost in a world that Marcus couldn't understand. Every time he thought he was making progress, she would retreat again as though some invisible force held her back. It was both frustrating and heartbreaking. Marcus had faced many dangers in his life. Alien creatures, battles, and ambushes. But this was different. There was no enemy he could fight, no weapon he could use. He was powerless in a way he had never experienced before. All he had was his presence, his words, and his patience. Each day he would talk to her about his home, his people, and the world he had left behind. He told her about Earth, how it was a place full of life, with bustling cities and peaceful forests, with oceans as vast as the skies. He told her about his experiences as a soldier, the battles he had fought, and the friends he had lost. It was a strange feeling, sharing his past with someone who seemed so far removed from it. But he hoped in some small way that it would help her remember what it was like to feel. One morning, as Marcus sat by Erilyn's bedside, he noticed something different. For the first time in days, she seemed to be looking at him, her violet eyes fixed on his face. There was no emotion in her gaze, but there was a spark of curiosity, something that had been missing before. She was listening. "Do you ever miss your home?" Erilyn asked, her voice quiet and distant. "Your Earth?" Marcus's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time she had spoken to him directly, and it felt like a small victory. But her question was laced with sadness, as though she too was longing for something she couldn't reach. "Every day," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I miss it. I miss the sound of the ocean, the warmth of the sun, the feeling of being with people who understand me. Earth is far from perfect, but it's home." Erilyn's eyes narrowed slightly, as though she was considering his words. "I don't remember what it feels like to have a home," she said, her voice quiet. "I don't remember what it was like to feel anything at all." Marcus's heart ached for her. He could hear the emptiness in her words, the loss that she felt deep inside. He reached out and gently took her hand, the same way he had the day they first met. This time, however, there was no hesitation. She didn't pull away. "You will," he said softly. "You will remember. You just have to keep going. You're stronger than you think, Erilyn. You've been through more than anyone should have to face, but you're still here. That's what matters." She didn't answer, but her fingers curled around his ever so slightly. It was the smallest of movements, but to Marcus, it was a sign of progress. It was a crack in the wall that had kept her imprisoned for so long. For the next few days, Marcus continued to talk to her, to encourage her, and to stay by her side. He shared more of his own life, hoping that his stories would help her connect to the emotions she had lost. He spoke of love, of family, of loss, and joy, trying to remind her of the warmth of human connection. He told her about his own struggles and the ways he had learned to keep moving forward, even when things seemed impossible. But despite the small signs of progress, there were still times when Aralyn seemed to retreat again, as though she was afraid to face the emotions that were slowly bubbling to the surface. Every time this happened, Marcus would not give up. He remained patient, gentle, and understanding, knowing that healing wasn't something that could happen overnight. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains of Zephyros, Marcus sat beside Aralyn once again. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of the leaves outside. Aralyn was staring out the window, her eyes lost in thought. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to be free?" Aralyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned to her, surprised by the depth of her question. "What do you mean by free?" She shifted slightly, her gaze still fixed on the view outside. "To not feel trapped by the weight of emotions, to not be controlled by them. I've lost so much of myself. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to stay empty, to stay like this, than to feel again." Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing for the right words. He understood what she meant, even if he didn't agree. He knew what it was like to feel lost and broken, to carry the weight of the past. But he also knew that the only way to heal was to face those feelings, not run from them. "You're not broken, Aralyn," he said, his voice steady. "You're not empty. You just haven't remembered what it's like to feel yet. But you will. And when you do, it won't be a curse. It will be a gift." Aralyn was silent for a long time, her eyes still distant. But Marcus could see something in her expression, something that wasn't there before. A flicker of hope, a glimmer of understanding. The days that followed were still full of struggle, but there were small moments of connection. Aralyn would ask more questions, speak more openly, and even smile faintly at times. She was still far from the person she once was, but Marcus could feel that she was starting to awaken. She was beginning to remember what it was like to feel, even if it was just a small spark of emotion at a time. For the first time since he had arrived on Zephyros, Marcus felt a sense of cautious optimism. He wasn't sure how long it would take or if he would be able to help her fully. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to give up. He would stay by her side, no matter how long it took, because he believed in her. And that belief, that hope, was the first step toward bringing her back to life. The days had become a blur of quiet moments, soft conversations, and long silences. Marcus had learned to be patient, to sit quietly by Aralyn's side as she slowly began to awaken from the numbness that had gripped her for so long. Her progress was still fragile, like a flower beginning to bloom after a long, harsh winter. But every little sign, every small spark, felt like a victory. There were days when Aralyn would sit up in bed, her eyes more focused than before. She would ask more questions about Marcus's life, his home, and the world outside of Zephyros. It was clear that the curiosity that had once been a part of her was starting to return. Slowly, she was beginning to reconnect with the world around her, though it was a slow and uncertain journey. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly through the windows of the palace, Marcus sat with her in the quiet garden. The air was warm, and the scent of flowers filled the space around them. Aralyn sat on a stone bench, her hands resting in her lap. She had been staring at the flowers for a long time, her face calm, yet distant. Marcus looked at her, watching her carefully. She had been quiet all morning, her gaze lost in thought. It was the first time in days that she hadn't said anything, and it made him uneasy. He knew she had been struggling with her emotions, unsure whether to embrace them or push them away. "Erilyn," Marcus said gently, his voice breaking the silence. She turned to look at him, her violet eyes meeting his. There was still a sadness in them, but there was something else, too, something that hadn't been there before. "I remember something," she said quietly. "I remember what it felt like to laugh." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Erilyn's eyes softened as she looked down at her hands. "When I was younger, I remember laughing with my friends. It felt good. It felt like I was alive. But now, it's as if that part of me is lost. I can't remember how it felt to be happy or to feel anything at all." Marcus's heart ached. For her. But he knew this was a breakthrough. She was beginning to remember her emotions, even if just a small piece at a time. He moved closer to her, sitting down on the bench beside her. "You will remember, Erilyn," he said softly. "It takes time. It's not easy, but you're getting there. You've already started to feel again. That's what matters." Erilyn looked at him, her gaze searching his face as if trying to find something. For a long moment she didn't speak, but then she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool, but there was a strength in her touch, a small spark of life. "I don't want to be empty anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want to feel nothing. I want to feel everything." Marcus smiled softly, his heart swelling with hope. "You will. I know you will." As the days passed, Erilyn's progress continued, slow but steady. She began to speak more freely, telling Marcus about her childhood, about her dreams, and about the times she had felt joy and sorrow. There were moments of laughter, small moments that reminded her of who she was before the darkness took hold of her. But there were also moments of pain, deep pain, as she confronted the emotions she had long buried. One evening, as the sky outside turned dark and the stars began to shine, Marcus sat with Erilyn in the palace garden. They were alone, the quiet of the night surrounding them. Erilyn leaned against the stone wall, her eyes gazing at the stars. "I used to watch the stars with my mother," she said, her voice soft. "We would sit out here, just the two of us, and she would tell me stories about the stars. She said that each one held a memory, a moment in time that was important." Marcus looked up at the stars, his mind filled with thoughts of his own home, of the nights he had spent staring at the sky. "I used to do the same thing," he said quietly. "Back on Earth, we'd look up at the stars, wondering what was out there. We'd tell stories about them, stories of heroes and adventures." Erilyn turned to him, her eyes curious. "What kind of stories?" Marcus smiled, remembering the tales of his childhood. The stories of brave soldiers, explorers, who traveled to distant lands and people who faced impossible odds. We told stories about finding treasure, discovering new worlds, and overcoming our fears. Erilyn looked up at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "I want to find something again," she said softly. "I want to feel like I've found something worth fighting for." The words struck Marcus deeply. He could hear the longing in her voice, the desire to reconnect with the world she had lost. He knew that she was still afraid, afraid of facing her emotions, afraid of opening herself up again. But he also knew that she was ready. "You have already found it," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "You've found yourself again. You're stronger than you realize, Erilyn, and you'll find what you're looking for. You just have to trust yourself." For a long moment, Erilyn didn't speak. She simply stared at the stars, her eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. But Marcus could see the change in her. He could see the spark that had been missing, the spark of life that was slowly returning to her. It wasn't fully there yet, but it was enough. It was enough to give him hope. "I think I'm starting to understand," Erilyn said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I'm starting to feel again." The words felt like a victory to Marcus. He had been patient, had remained by her side, even when it seemed like there was no progress. But now, he could see that the flame was growing stronger. She wasn't fully healed, but she was no longer lost in the darkness. She was finding her way back. "I knew you could do it," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride. Erilyn turned to him, her eyes shining with a softness he had never seen before. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. "I'm not empty anymore," she said quietly, her voice filled with both relief and joy. "I'm not empty anymore." And in that moment, Marcus knew that he had helped her find her way back, that he had helped light the flame that had been extinguished for so long. The journey wasn't over yet, but they had made it through the hardest part. Erilyn had found the strength to face her emotions, and now there was nothing holding her back. The days in the palace had become brighter, filled with the soft hum of progress. Erilyn was no longer the silent, distant princess she had once been. She had begun to speak more freely, to laugh softly, and even to cry when the emotions she had kept buried for so long finally broke through. Every day brought a new challenge, but also a new victory. Her journey was far from over, but the change in her was undeniable. Marcus stayed by her side, just as he had promised. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the fear of fully embracing her emotions, but he also saw the determination. Erilyn had come so far, and though she still had moments of doubt, there was something stronger now, the spark of hope. One afternoon, they sat together in the garden once more. The sun was warm, and the soft breeze carried the scent of flowers and fresh grass. The world outside seemed peaceful, a stark contrast to the inner battles Erilyn had fought. But for the first time, she seemed at peace. She was no longer fighting her emotions. She was learning to accept them. "I never realized how much I had been running from," Erilyn said, her voice quiet but filled with understanding. "I thought I had lost everything, but it was really just locked away, hidden inside me." Marcus smiled softly, his heart swelling with pride. "It wasn't lost, Erilyn. You just needed time to find it again." She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with gratitude. "You've helped me more than I can ever thank you for. I don't think I could have done this without you." "You've done it all yourself," Marcus replied gently. "I've just been here to support you." Erilyn's smile grew a little brighter. "Still, I owe you more than I could ever give." The two of them sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the world around them. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Erilyn, that was enough. She had learned that it was okay to feel, okay to embrace the joy and the pain, the laughter and the tears. It was all a part of being alive. As the days passed, Marcus noticed more changes in Erilyn. She began to engage with the world around her more, asking questions, expressing opinions, and even taking on small tasks that once seemed impossible to her. She no longer felt like a prisoner of her own emotions. The world was opening up to her again, and it was a beautiful thing to witness. One evening, Queen Silrith came to visit. She had heard of the progress Erilyn had made and came to see her daughter for the first time in weeks. She entered the garden where Marcus and Erilyn sat, her eyes filled with hope and cautious optimism. "Mother," Erilyn said, her voice filled with a warmth Marcus hadn't heard in a long time. She stood up to greet the queen, her movements no longer slow and unsure. There was strength in her now. "I'm so glad you're here." Silrith's eyes shimmered with tears as she embraced her daughter. "I've missed you, my sweet child," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've Missed you so much? Aralyn hugged her back, her own arms strong and sure. I've missed you too, Mother. I've missed everything. When they pulled apart, Silrith looked at Marcus, her expression full of gratitude. You've done more than I could have ever hoped for, she said softly. Thank you. Marcus nodded, his heart full. It was all Aralyn. She's the one who found her way back. Aralyn smiled at her mother, her face radiant with a newfound light. I think I've finally found myself again, Mother. I'm not the person I was, but that's okay. I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to live again. Silrith took her daughter's hand, her heart swelling with emotion. You've always been my strength, Aralyn. I knew you would come back to me. And now, I see the person you are becoming. I'm so proud of you. Marcus watched the two of them, feeling a sense of pride and relief. He had been a part of something incredible. He had helped this young princess rediscover her emotions, to awaken a part of her that had been locked away for far too long. And, in doing so, he had helped save not only her life, but the future of her people. As the evening turned to night, the three of them sat together, sharing stories and laughter under the stars. The warmth of the evening wrapped around them like a blanket, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. In the days that followed, Aralyn continued to grow stronger. She began to take on more responsibilities as the princess of Zephyros, reconnecting with her people and learning to embrace the emotions she had once feared. Her laughter returned, a sound that filled the halls of the palace and echoed through the hearts of the Zephyrians. And as for Marcus, he knew that his time on Zephyros was coming to an end. His mission was complete, and the bond he had formed with Aralyn had changed him in ways he hadn't expected. He had come to Zephyros to help a princess, but in the process, he had found something more, a sense of purpose, a connection to someone from another world, and a reminder of the power of human emotion. The day came when Marcus had to leave Zephyros. Aralyn and Queen Silrith both came to see him off, their faces filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. You've given me the greatest gift, Marcus, Aralyn said, her voice steady but full of emotion. You've shown me that I can feel again, that I can be whole. Thank you. Marcus smiled, his heart heavy. You've always been whole, Aralyn. You just had to remember that. With one final embrace, Marcus boarded his ship. As the doors closed, he looked out at the palace one last time. Aralyn stood there, her eyes bright, her face filled with hope. She was no longer the princess who had lost everything. She was a woman who had found herself again. The ship lifted off, and as it soared into the sky, Marcus knew that he had done something important. He had helped light a flame that would never be extinguished, a flame that would burn brightly in Aralyn's heart for the rest of her life. And as the stars stretched out before him, he felt a quiet sense of peace. His work here was done. But the story of Aralyn and the journey they had shared would stay with him forever.